We're going to do a little bit of a mashup today, combine both Learn, Think, Act with the podcast. For the first 3 minutes, we'll focus on the video that'll be connected to the Learn, Think, Act, which is our newsletter. And then the remainder of it, we'll go into more detail. We'll kind of build out and share some specific stories around how I apply this idea. The area that we're going to focus on this week is addressing a challenge that many of us have with meetings. Have you ever been in one of those meetings where you're like, wow, this really could have been an email, or feel like you've wasted a lot of time because you happen to be in the wrong meeting, or feel like the person who's leading the meeting is not super interested in your feedback, your contribution. They act like they're interested in it, but really they're more interested in sharing their perspective. Let's go ahead and solve for that using the idea of a jobs to be done framework when thinking about meetings. And if you're not watching the video of this, go take a look at YouTube and see the video, or sign up for Learn, Think, Act and you'll see the video component. What I want to start with is the idea of a jobs to be done framework. What's the specific job to be done of the meeting that we're engaged in? Well, there are 3 distinct jobs to be done from my perspective in a meeting. Number one is let's make a decision. So we're going to make a decision. That would be the first job to be done of a meeting. Is the meeting that we're holding a decision-making meeting? If so, let's make sure we're sharing information in advance and then also sharing the criteria that we're going to use to make the decision. The second type of meeting, that's meeting 1. Meeting type number 2 is one where we're going to convey information and expect there to be some questions that come up as a result. So convey information and expect some kind of Q&A. So a decision-making meeting, number 1, a convey information, deliver information meeting, number 2. These are the meetings where typically someone might say that really could have been an email. If it could have been an email and you're not expecting some questions, then make it an email and don't waste people's time in this type of meeting. And the third type of meeting is a collaborative meeting. This is one of those meetings where we need to take advantage of the collective intelligence of the entire group. We need their perspective. We want to share information. We want to work together as a team to either solve a problem, design for a solution, or align on strategy and tactics. So those are the 3 types of meetings that I believe exist out there based on my experience in leading both small teams, large teams, and teams of teams, conducting one-on-ones, conducting group meetings. If you were to boil them down, even thinking about meetings with customers, if you were boiling them down into 3 different types of meetings, we're either making a decision, we're conveying information, or we're collaborating. Making a decision, conveying information, or collaborating. 3 different types. So what I want you to do this week is take a look at each of the meetings that you're in and just make a note. Was this a decision-making meeting? Was it a meeting where information was conveyed and there were questions that were supposed to be asked? Or was it a collaborative meeting? Biggest mistake that people make when leading meetings like this, they make the mistake of trying to combine all 3 into one. Don't do it. You're wasting your team's time. You're going to struggle. You're going to end up spending more time kind of task switching from thing to thing. Don't do it. Shorten up your meetings. Focus either on decision making, conveying information, or having a collaborative meeting. So assess your meetings over the course of the next week. If you'd like to see an assessment tool, we'll include it in the Learn, Think, Act. Assess those meetings over the course of the next week. Give yourself some check marks associated with what type of meeting that you're involved in. Also note, are you the one leading the meeting or are you a participant in that meeting? We're first going to assess. Then the thing that I want you to do the week after next is start thinking about, of these meetings, which ones can you combine, which ones can you eliminate, and which ones can you specialize in? So this is the end of the Learn, Think, Act piece. If you want to subscribe to Learn, Think, Act, just head to findmycatalyst.com. We do videos like this every week, typically released on Sunday, that share information, ask you to reflect on that information, and then take a specific action. We're going to put learning into practice and eliminate the waste and scrap. So let's move into the broader podcast discussion. Let's go a bit deeper into each of these. We'll talk about a decision-making meeting. Actually, first, before we even get there, why don't we start with just some of the common mistakes made with meetings. One of the biggest mistakes that I think people make with meeting is a lack of clarity around the specific objective of the meeting. Like, why are we meeting? What is our specific objective? If you put together a call plan before you put your meeting together, you will have already put together your objective for the meeting and anticipate the objectives of others. Remember, the call plan is that square. There's a tool around this. You can go into any of the information I put around effective meetings. You'll see the detail there. I'll include links in the show notes. But number one, let's make sure there's an objective. Why is it important to have an objective? Because if we don't have an objective, how are you going to get there? If you don't have an objective, how are you going to get there? So number one mistake, there's no objective. Number two mistake, they attempt to do all three of these things: make a decision, share information, and collaborate at the same time. And ultimately what they're doing is they're complicating the meeting. They think that people are going to like the meeting a little bit more because they're going to feel better about it. But the reality is people will get frustrated. Some people will feel like they're not involved in it. Some people will feel like their voice doesn't matter. Some people will feel like they don't really understand why they're there or what is actually happening. So get back to the objective. So let's, number one, not try to overcomplicate the meeting by trying to do too much. Number two, make sure that we have a clear objective. I swap those. Have a clear objective. Don't overcomplicate. And then the third piece that we typically will screw up is at the end of the meeting, we forget to clarify what the specific next steps are. What are our actual next steps? So I have a color coding system that I use when taking notes for meetings. I'm going to show you what this looks like. I actually talked with a friend of mine, Eric, last week about this. I like to use a black marker for any general notes. I like to use a blue marker for things that I think are interesting, but I don't want to bring up during the meeting because it might take things off track. I use a red marker for next steps. And then I use a green marker just in case I have to have other kind of like miscellaneous information, something extra there. So I've got another variable I can add. But my three primary ones are black, red, and blue. Black for general notes, blue for things that I think are interesting that I want to bring up at a future time, and red for the specific next steps. Make sure you have next steps super clear before you wrap up the meeting. And what I mean here, this is who is going to do what by when. Who is going to do what by when? And how are they going to communicate and share that back with the stakeholders who spent their time in this meeting? There's so much time that we waste in meetings. We waste people's time because they don't have a role in the meeting. We waste people's time because we are not aligned on things like communication. There's not clarity around how we're communicating. And we waste people's time because we have the same meetings over and over and over again. If you have clarity around what your objectives are, you simplify by having a specific job to be done at the meeting, and you identify your next steps, you will make your meetings more effective. And you can do this immediately, whether you're the person leading the meeting or you're a participant who is leading self, but an active participant in the meeting. What do I mean there? So if there's somebody in your office or your operating environment who's leading the meeting, and the meetings tend to just drone on, they don't have a point. They don't end with a clear set of next steps, or there's a lack of clarity around what the specific objectives of the meeting or the type of meeting. Ask the leader of the meeting. Don't do it in the middle of the meeting. You're going to get them defensive. Do it before the meeting. Share some information. I was actually called out on this recently in a client environment where they, after sharing some information around the different types of meetings, because we're going a bit deeper into this around how do we help people be better leaders of self in the context of a specific skill, which is communication, which is where we get into meetings. And the question came up, hey, when we have a sales meeting, what type of meeting is it? Well, I'll tell you what the type of meeting that a sales meeting is. A meeting where we're going to convey information and we're going to expect some back and forth with Q&A. It is not a collaborative meeting. We're not looking to solve a problem. We're not looking to design for a solution. We're not looking to align on strategy and tactics. In a general sales meeting, a sales team meeting, a monthly meeting that I'll have with the broader sales team, with one of the organizations I work with, our primary objective is to convey information. Now, that information that's conveyed is broken up into a couple of specific areas, keys inside our business. It's about conveying information. Given that the meeting's about conveying information, there's some things I can do in advance of the meeting to help the team be in a better position to both know what type of questions they might have and also be prepared for the information that's being shared. So the thing I'm going to start doing is share my slides on the Sunday evening before that meeting. That meeting happens on Wednesdays, usually the third Wednesday of each month. So I'll share my slides in advance. This change is a result of direct feedback and some questions that I received from a member of my team. We can adjust, we can iterate, we can get better. We can constantly work toward getting better. Be really clear around the type of meeting and be super clear around next steps. So on the next steps side of things, one of the things I like to do, again, is use the red marker, in order to list out next steps. And I like to, throughout the meeting, keep track of those notes. Now, sometimes if we're doing this on a whiteboard, you'll see me put a red marker up on the board. And actually, I do not have a red marker right in front of me. I'll use a blue one here as an example. But let's say I have some specific next steps that need to be accomplished. I'll put those up either on the whiteboard or inside my notes and put a small checkbox just to the left of that next step. And in parentheses, I'll put the name of the person. And then we'll agree before the meeting wraps up around who is going to do what by when. Who's going to do what by when. When you put these next steps out there, you can start to hold people accountable, both yourself and your team accountable to getting the work done. Another challenge that I've had historically when it comes to leading meetings, and I was talking with another person earlier this week, it was last week, as I was going through some of the market feasibility stuff that we're doing around whiteboard sessions. And the perception from him was that I was one of those people who would stand up in front of the room and just kind of push out information, share information. And it was just this sharing of stuff that was going out there. In a convey information meeting, that makes sense. Let's be really clear about what it is but create that space for Q&A. If there's something a little bit different that's happening across the team where we need to have more engagement, we actually need to solve a problem, design for a solution, or align on strategy and tactics, then let's make sure that the expectation is set well in advance. The person who leads either of these three meetings can lead any of those three meetings. The challenge is making sure that you go in there with a plan and have an approach that you're going to use in order to do so. So let's talk about the specific type of meetings, the decision-making meeting, and how we set ourselves up for success in that area. So if the focus is on making a decision, here are what my recommendations are. This is how I would lead a meeting like that. Number one, I would make sure that I'm sharing information in advance around the type of decision to be made. What is the type of decision that we're making? What are we actually working through? This is when you're going to need to hold your team accountable to doing the read ahead information in advance. And we're all busy. I've been there. I've done it. I know what it's like when you send information out and people don't read in advance. One of the things you could do is you could summarize that read ahead. And then in the first 5 minutes of the meeting, have everybody stay really focused on going through and doing the reading, go through and do the pre-reading. But first thing I want to do is I want to make sure all of the information is shared in advance. And if everybody is held accountable to reading and reviewing that information in advance, then when you come together, you can share a brief summary, make sure that everybody's aligned on the type of decision that's going to be made. And then the second thing you want to be aligned on are what are the criteria we're going to use to make the decision. What are the criteria? Now, if you've been around me long enough, you know that I like to use 2x2s from a decision-making perspective. We can make a decision based on one line, right? If we make that decision based on a single dimension, we're going to take on some potential risk. We might have a blind spot. So if we add in a second dimension, a second thing that we're going to prioritize against, now we can start to scale 1 to 10 or 1 to 10 here. And that can start to inform people's perspective on how we make a decision. What is it that we're prioritizing? How do we prioritize this over that? This over that. Another way to look at this, the X and Y axis don't actually have to cross. They could come from a single zero. We could go out to 10 here and out to 10 here. And that might be a better way to kind of make the decision, is kind of where do things go? What risk are we willing to take on when making a decision? So the first thing I want to do in a decision-making meeting is make sure that I share all of the information ahead of time that will help people make the decision. What's the decision we're going to make? Why is it important to make this decision? What is it? Why is it important? What's the impact of making the decision? Who is related to the decision in what way, shape, or form? who's related to the decision one way, shape, or form. Because if we have those who's identified, then we'll gain additional perspective and will help reduce blind spots. That's kind of like the top end of that hexagon, if you think about it. It's what, who, and why. When we have those pieces of information, we're going to get ourselves into a better position where we'll be able to make effective decisions, or at least accelerate the way that we make decisions. The second type of meeting, that convey information meeting, what we want to do is share information in advance so that people can read up, because some people may process information a little bit differently than others. So bear with me a little bit. If you've prepared properly for the meeting, you should be able to share or convey that information beforehand. If people have a chance to read through the information in advance, then they'll be in a position where they can ask more informed questions, because your focus here is getting the questions out of the team that is in there participating in the meeting. You're giving information, and then you want some kind of feedback in the questions that you get. The cool thing about the questions, everybody in the room starts to absorb the information better when they hear the team asking questions. Sometimes, oh, that was a really good question. I got a little bit of information. We end up getting more clarity. The other part about it is the person who is sharing the information, who's leading the information, will get a little bit more information around what people are thinking about and how they're thinking about it. The most common mistakes that I've made around this is I shared too much information, moved too fast, thought everybody was on board, and ultimately folks were kind of toning out. This is when you read a whole list of things on a slide. You've got this word wall on a slide, or you are working on conveying too much information in a specific time period over a short time period. So be careful about making this mistake. Let's shift to the area that I am focusing a lot of time, energy, and attention on, which is how do we make the meetings that we have, whether in a virtual environment like this, in front of a camera on Zoom or Teams, or in person, more effective? How do we take advantage of the collective intelligence that we have among an entire group to actually do things that we can't do in an asynchronous environment? These are the collaborative meetings. And I was fortunate enough to lead a breakout session, a breakout session at Learning 2024. And one of the things that I can tell you is the energy in the room changes when you get interaction happening across people. Think about it. People invested time, energy, and resource, get on airplanes, go stay in hotels, be out of their work operation to be together in a group. The last thing they need is some sage from the stage communicating things out, where they're just kind of taking down, jotting notes, and aren't really clear around how does it apply to what they do or how they're going to do something. So let's talk about a collaborative meeting, both in the context of internal customers and external customers. What happens when you can hand the dry erase marker off to somebody else and they can start putting the things up on the board? And that's how I used to run sales meetings with clients. Some of the most effective meetings that I would have with clients would be the ones where we're able to sit down, whether I was in a customer success role or an account executive role or an executive role inside an organization, where we're able to work together to build something together up on the whiteboard. And this is why I'm excited about the guided whiteboard sessions that we've launched recently. And I'm so optimistic about it that I guarantee results. I guarantee that we will achieve the outcome that we expect as a result of working through the processes and tools that I have to help do this in the context of solving a problem, designing for a solution or experience, designing to achieve a specific result, or aligning on strategy and tactics to achieve a specific result. And those are three different types of meetings. These things, the problem solving, the design, and the alignment type of collaborative meeting. There's something about working together. There's something about seeing your words get put up on a whiteboard. You've seen some of it if you're watching the video today as we build through this, and I share some of the notes as we're talking through this podcast that's both should work in an audio format and work in a visual format. There's something about the energy and how it changes in the room as you turn your back and start sharing information, start drawing information up on a board. A friend of mine, Rick, had pointed that out to me. It creates this space where people can think a little bit more. So you get to build together, you get to think. And I believe in a collaborative environment, there's a benefit to having an external resource help you do this because it gives you a chance to be a part of the audience, sit back and listen and observe. It helps you avoid any of the biases that you might have in some of the questions you ask and some of the blind spots that you might have out there. So this is something you can work with me on. I do guided whiteboard sessions for teams of up to 10 people for up to 90 minutes to either solve a problem, design a specific solution, or align on strategy and tactics. So let's talk about the problem solving piece. Well, one of the problem solving pieces is that there are many times that we get into a meeting and certain people will overtake the conversation. They will share information out of context, and it's hard to move on from their sharing, their collaboration, especially if you are the person who's leading the meeting and you're the leader of that team. Because when you stop someone with their sharing or you work to move on to something else, you can start to create this behavior of, hey, maybe it doesn't make sense for me to raise my hand and engage. And when you create that behavior of that feeling of maybe it doesn't make sense for me to raise my hand and engage, what will end up happening is your team will start to disconnect. So bringing an external resource in to the room can help this. Now, you can lean on external resources inside your organization. What's really cool about this, if you apply a problem-solving framework like the hexagon to managing this type of guiding, this type of meeting, you can bring in an external person from inside your organization who's not connected to the specific problem and will continue to ask open questions around the background of the problem that people might be avoiding because of the cursive expertise that you have inside your business or the biases that exist because you've already attempted to solve it in one way, shape, or another. The beauty of being a good leader is you feel very comfortable asking questions. And it's your obligation as a leader to ask those questions because somebody in the room might have the same question, but they may not feel comfortable raising their hand and asking the question because there's a belief that they should already know the answer to that thing. So by you as a leader asking that question, we as leaders asking that question, we can help others kind of overcome specific blind spots and start to get comfortable and align on a specific thing that we're working toward. When meetings like this are run effectively, the team can actually come together, collaborate. You think about what people are starting to do with these, what they call it, the escape rooms. They collaborate on achieving a specific objective. They're focused on this specific area. Imagine if you put together something like this, a meeting where you as a team either are designing for a solution or working towards solving a problem, maybe even aligning on strategy and tactics. How might that change the way that your team works and operates together? One of the cool things about having a team, a diverse team with a diverse set of experiences, whether that's from industries that they've been a part of or roles that they've been a part of or types of teams that they've interacted on, is they can start to help you think different and do different when it comes to solving a specific problem. They can help you innovate in a way that other organizations talk about doing, but you can actually do because you're leveraging the collective intelligence of the team. So you can look at a meeting like this, a guided whiteboard session, a problem-solving exercise as a way to create greater levels of team building inside your organization. Forget about the trust falls in the escape room and all of the other things that you might have out there, activities. Why not just get the group together and focus on solving a specific thorny problem? Maybe that specific thorny problem is focused on your customers, external customers, or it could be focused on internal customers. But imagine what happens if the team comes together in that collaborative environment. How might the engagement, how might the connection, how might the trust be able to be built over time? Based on some of the feedback that I've gotten on the way that some of these meetings have happened and both using the whiteboard as a tool to help document information, but also using some of the Catalyst tools as a way to help guide through the conversation, whether around solving a problem or designing for a solution or aligning on strategy and tactics, is an outcome of a meeting like this, where you use a whiteboard and you have those notes in public, open in front of everybody, is a high level of clarity around what was discussed, what was agreed to, what is going to happen next, why it's important that thing is going to happen next, and who is actually going to do it. So I like to think about this in the context of what, why, and what's next. What, why, and what's next. Another piece, and I'm just looking at notes based on some of the feedback that we've gotten on these as we've gone through it. And if this is interesting, give me a call or go to the website, go to findmycatalyst.com/whiteboard to get more information. The clarity of action is a clear piece. Like what ends up happening is a lot of times in these meetings, whether we're working to collaborate and either solve a problem, design for a solution, or align on a task, there's value in identifying that specific next step and who is going to do what, and not making it too big. I think there's a really big opportunity to help solve for a challenge that we have with meetings and start eliminating meetings. We leave the discussion thinking that we aligned on something, but ultimately everybody has a slightly different perspective of what it was that we actually aligned on. So by documenting up on a whiteboard, getting notes up on a whiteboard, or sharing them internally. One of the things I like to use is a running Google Doc. So it has a high level of clarity around what's discussed and what's next, the open action items. When you do this, then people will leave the meeting with a higher level of understanding of who is going to do what by when, who is going to do what by when. I feel like I'm starting to get a little bit rambly as we're going through this. It hit on a couple of the areas where we've gotten a lot of feedback, positive feedback on the value of these types of meetings and the level of clarity that's happened, the team building that's happened, the energy that has been created inside the room. And if you are struggling with meetings, know that you've got someone who has made a lot of mistakes in running meetings, has made a lot of changes in the way that I operate meetings, and more specifically have been fortunate enough to find ways to eliminate the unnecessary meetings. And just in the form of recap, the way that I eliminate unnecessary meetings is by having a special or specific focus for each meeting. Is it a meeting where we are going to make a decision? Is it a meeting where we're going to convey information and expect some questions? Or is it a meeting where we're going to collaborate? Let's first solve for that. Then once we've identified that we are going to do one of those things, let's put our call plan in place, the who, the objectives on both sides, the desired next steps, to make sure that the meeting we're holding achieves the objective that we were looking for. Either get to a decision, convey some information and get some feedback, questions, or move toward a collaborative meeting. And in that collaborative meeting, I would organize those around 3 different types: problem-solving meeting, a design meeting, and an execution or achieving results through alignment on strategy and tactics. If you have questions, please contact me directly. You can find me at findmycatalyst.com. The whiteboard landing page is listed there. If you want to do this and get better at the communication side, the decision-making side, and the problem-solving side of leadership, check out the Leader Lab. If you know of somebody who would find value in this podcast episode, please share it with them. The shares help us. Rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to it. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking different about your process? Thank you.